And ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, this is TV Courtroom, hosted by yours truly, attorney Michael Cord, aka Michael X. I am happy that you are here with us today because I have some very important information to share. I'd like to think that I always have very important information to share, but I have to say today's show is one of the most important shows because it's a matter of life or death, and that's no hyperbole. Again, welcome to TV Courtroom. Again, this is yours truly, attorney Michael Cord. And what I try to do during every episode here on TV Courtroom, in the very same way I do something similar on the radio courtroom, and that's on WURD 96.1 FM. And what I do every Saturday from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, big shout out to our producer extraordinaire, Roland, who put it up on the screen. Every Saturday from 1 o'clock p.m. until 3 o'clock p.m., I host a show called the Radio Courtroom. And what I've tried to do, and I think it's been successful, is to take that radio courtroom concept and make it the TV courtroom concept, where we talk about the law, but we don't talk about it in an ivory tower kind of way. We don't talk about it in a holier than thou kind of way. We do it the way that Brother Malcolm, if you look over my left shoulder, you see a poster of Malcolm. And there's so many things I learned from this great brother, but I think the most important as a lawyer I learned from him is that make it plain. And Brother Malcolm used to always say, make it plain no matter who you are. If you're a plumber and you're talking to somebody about plumbing, make it plain. If you're a rocket scientist and you're talking about that, make it plain. Anything, no matter how convoluted it might otherwise be, you can make it plain simply by being plain talking. And that's what I try to do when I talk on the radio courtroom about the law. That's what I try to do when I talk about the law here at the TV courtroom. And today we're going to have two guests. And I love it when we have guests because I get a chance to question them. And just as you might have questions that are relevant, I certainly do. And I wanted to have these two guests, which, by the way, I'll introduce in a couple of minutes. We'll have them on in approximately 5 minutes. We're going to talk about what I call Black Judges Matter. When I say Black Judges Matter, just like people say who are woke, who are conscious, who are progressive, Black Lives Matter. It's so funny because anytime I yell and scream Black Lives Matter, I hear about people who say, well, what about other lives? Well, my point is we're not talking about them right now. It's almost like going down the street and see a house on fire. And you call the firemen and the firewomen. They show up at the scene and they pour water onto the burning house because that burning house matters because it's on fire. Yeah, the other houses are half a block away, a couple miles away across the country. Those houses matter too, but not right now for our purposes. So all houses don't matter in that situation. So when we say Black Lives Matter, we're talking about what has happened to Black people on this land that became America in 1776. But it was even before then, it was 1619. We all know, if we're students of history, August 25, 1619, approximately 30 Black men, women, and children from Angola were brought to the colony of Virginia. That's 1619. Fast forward to 1776, you got about 56 white male property owners signed the Declaration of Independence. And guess what? More than 40 of them were enslavers or involved in the slave trade. So you got people who declared their independence from Great Britain. Their argument, and it was a great argument, their argument was about taxation without representation. And that made perfect sense. Taxation without representation. If you're going to pay taxes, as the 13 colonies did, to the British Parliament, if you're going to pay taxes, you should have some representation in Parliament. And the 13 colonies didn't have that. So they rose up. They tried to negotiate peacefully. That didn't work. So they picked up arms and they rose up and a war was up and took place. And when that war began, it actually began in 1775, but historians use the date July 4, 1776, because that's the date of the Declaration. But my point is this. They took up arms because they felt that they were being exploited. They felt that they were being oppressed, and they were. And they said, hey, to hell with this. We oppose taxation without representation. So, as Brother Malcolm said, we're going to get freedom by any means necessary. But as great as that cry was about taxation without representation, those founding fathers were hypocrites. Because while they were complaining about paying taxes and not having any representation, they were enslaving Black men, women, and children. You talk about the height of historical hypocrisy. That was it. What's worse, having to pay taxes without having any political representation, or being kidnapped and bought and sold and enslaved and whipped and beaten and castrated and raped and sodomized from 1619 to 1865, 246 years of that. So when we talk about Black Lives Matter, we're talking about that. And today in particular, of those Black Lives Matter, we're talking about Black Judges Matter. When I say Black Judges Matter, what I'm saying is this, and it's important that you understand that. A wise woman once said, all my skin folk ain't my kinfolk. What does that mean? That means simply because you're Black in terms of your color, your skin, doesn't make you Black in terms of your consciousness and your culture. Look at, for example, Clarence Thomas. And this is my opinion. I want to make that clear. But my opinion is based on my research. Here you have, from my opinion, a Black man who became a judge on the backs of the Black struggle. And once he became a judge, a Supreme Court justice, in fact, completely turned his back on Black people. So he might be my color, but he ain't my kind. He might be my skin folk, but he's not my kinfolk. So what I'm talking about today, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, are Black judges who have a Black conscience, who have a Black spirituality, have a Black perspective, while being fair to everybody who comes in front of them. Black people were not permitted to be lawyers. So certainly they weren't permitted to be judges early on. So white folks were lawyers, white folks were judges, and that was fine as far as America was concerned. And those white folks did what they did for white people. Those white folks, lawyers and judges, upheld the law of slavery from 1619 to 1865. So don't tell me now that, hey, if you're talking about Black Judges Matter, that's unfair. That's bias. Well, what the hell was going on from 1619 to 1865 and beyond? Because it's not as if Black folks got their freedom through the 13th Amendment in December of 1865 and left the plantation and moved into Beverly Hills. It didn't quite happen like that, because after the 13th Amendment of 1865, there was still sharecropping. There was still convict leasing. There was still disenfranchisement. There was still Jim Crow. In fact, Black folks didn't begin to kind of, sort of, get the door to opportunity slightly open until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That's within your lifetime, or that's within your parents' lifetime. So don't tell me about, hey, this Black thing, you shouldn't wear it on your sleeve like you do, Michael Cord. Every time you're talking about Black folks. You're damn right. I'm always talking about Black folks. I'm always talking about Black liberation. Because every single advancement that Black people have gotten in this country came from fighting, blood, sweat, and tears. White folks never gave us anything. In fact, if your oppressor gives you your freedom, then you never really had it. The only way you have freedom is to take it. And every advancement that Black folks have gotten in America came from Blacks fighting for it and woke white allies joining us. So here we are today in 2023. And I'm sad to say not a whole lot has changed. You might say not a whole lot has changed. What are you talking about, Michael Cord? You were just talking about slavery, and now you're talking about 2023 and saying not much has changed. Well, here's my example. Obviously, I'd be a fool to say that things are worse today than they were during slavery, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this. If today, in 2023, you had to be a defendant in a criminal case, and all things being equal, you're a defendant, whether you're Black or white or whatever, got the same education, the same income, same job, live in the same neighborhood, have the same clothing, all those things, all equal. And despite all those being equal, if you had to be a defendant in a criminal courtroom today in 2023, and you could choose, would you choose to go as a Black defendant or a white defendant? In 2023, again, everything being equal, you know you would not choose to go in as a Black defendant. Even in 2023, you would have said that in 1623, 1723, 1823, 1923, and damn it, you would say the very same thing today in America. So don't tell me that it's wonderful and we're in a post-racial society. We are not. Let me give you another example. And the other example is, what if tomorrow, again, all things being equal, same car, you're in North Philly leaving Temple University campus, and it's, I don't know, say 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, leaving Temple University in North Philly, and you're driving up Broad Street near Susquehanna. And as you're pulling up toward the light on Broad and Susquehanna, you notice lights and sirens from a police car behind you. So you pull over, but as that cop is approaching your vehicle, if you had the choice of being a Black driver or a white driver, as that cop approaches you in 2023, would you choose to be a Black driver or a white driver? You know that's a rhetorical question, because nobody would choose to be a Black driver in 2023 in the North, in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, if you could choose instead to be white. That doesn't mean that you think whites are better than Blacks. It's simply saying that you're not stupid and you know that whites are treated better than Blacks. So that's why I say Black judges matter, because we need to level the playing field. And I'm not talking about equality. I'm talking about equity. There's a difference. And by the way, in 2 minutes, in fact, 1 minute, we're going to have, and we'll have their photos up on the screen in about 60 seconds, our two guests. But let me just make this point. When it comes to the situation affecting Black people and getting justice, that pursuit of justice doesn't cry out for equality. That pursuit of justice calls out for equity. There's a difference between equity and equality. They're not synonymous. Here's the difference. Equality ignores the past. Equity factors in the past. Best example I can give you, there's a track meet, there's a race. So you put the Black runner here, you put the white runner here, and then you say, go ahead and run. You're both at the same starting line. But what you don't factor in is that that white runner has been training for 246 years, from 1619 to 1865. That white runner has the best food and the best equipment, even has steroids. But that Black runner was shackled and kidnapped and beaten and raped and castrated and sodomized for 246 years. So you put them both at the same point of the starting line, because that's what equality calls for, and then you run the race. You know what's going to happen. So what equity does is say, hold it, let's level the playing field, either by putting that Black person a few steps ahead, or putting that white person a few steps behind, or, as far as I'm concerned, a little bit of both. That's what it's all about. And if justice means anything, equity as opposed to equality is the key thing. One thing I'll say, final thing, in 30 seconds, we'll have our guests. It comes down to this. In order to get justice in America, as Brother Malcolm X said, it's either by the ballot or the bullet. And don't get nervous when I start talking about the bullets, because your founding fathers got their freedom from Great Britain, not by sitting at the negotiation table and speaking calmly. They took up arms. That's the history of America. But I'm not advocating that for Black people, and neither was Malcolm. He said the ballot or the bullet. So let's take the bullet and put it off to the side and simply talk about the ballot. The ballot is how Black folks will ever get justice in America. And it's so important that we get woke Black judges. Having said that, my two guests today, one is actually both are attorneys, one by the name of Joe Green, is an attorney by the name of Brother Qawi Abdul Rahman. And let me do this. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do my angry black man thing today, but I'm going to wait until these two gentlemen leave because I don't want anybody to blame them for the stuff I'm going to say after we finish with the interview, because these are civil, professional gentlemen, and sometimes I tend to go a little crazy like a fox, that is. Let me just say this. Now I'm going to introduce our guest. In the upcoming May primary, there are going to be 11 electoral positions. And by that, I mean there's the mayor, there's city council, there's the city controller, city commissioners, sheriff, register of wills, and then there are 5 key spots or positions. There's Supreme Court, there's Superior Court, there's Commonwealth Court, there's Court of Common Pleas, and there's Municipal Court. Now, of all those 11 I mentioned, including the mayor, the most important are those 5 judicial positions. Why? Because unlike the mayor, unlike the governor, and even unlike the president of the United States, judges have 4 awesome powers that the mayor, the governor, and the president don't have. For example, a judge can take away your property by imposing a fine. A judge can take away your liberty by throwing you in jail. A judge can take away your children through a custody order, and a judge can take away your life through a death penalty order. Those are 4 awesome powers. So we want to make sure that we know who we're giving these powers to. Having said that, you'll see now on the screen my 2 good friends, attorneys, Joe Green and Abdul Rahman. Let me just spend about 30 seconds introducing both of them, and then I'll have them give us a brief presentation of why they're running, why they're qualified, and any other important information. Let me start with Joe Green. Joe Green is a former defense attorney and a former assistant DA in Montgomery County. He's now an assistant DA here in Philadelphia County as an assistant chief in the diversion unit. And there's so many things I could say about Joe, but it'll take me 2 or 3 hours. So let me just cut it to about 2 or 3 minutes. In his role as a prosecutor, he looks at the responsibility as prosecution, not persecution. We've had DAs in the past whose names I won't mention who were more about persecution than prosecution. Unfortunately, we have somebody like Joe Green who has this excellent reputation and this impressive background. When I say impressive background, I'm talking about academic background in addition to a professional background. Other thing is this: Joe's from North Philly. In addition, he's a graduate of historic Chain University. So I want to talk about Joe being a qualified candidate, a great scholar, and committed to the community. In the same breath, I want to talk about Brother Abdul Rahman in terms of his background. Also extremely qualified, not just licensed to practice here in Pennsylvania, but in New Jersey, Delaware, and Florida. He served as a law clerk. And one thing I didn't know until very recently, he also did work in contract negotiations with NFL teams for NFL prospects. He worked in the Miami-Dade County Public Defender's Office. He's known for doing quite a bit of pro bono work and has received a number of awards. He's a coach in North Philly, football coach. So much great stuff about Brother Abdul Rahman, just as Brother Green. Let me start off with Brother Abdul Rahman. First of all, how are you today?
Excellent, brother. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and it's a pleasure, and I do mean a pleasure and an honor to have both you and Brother Green, who we'll get to in just a second. I talked about your background in a general sense to let people know that you have the basic qualifications to run for and get elected as judge. But I want you to delve deeper. Why, 1, are you running? And 2, why should people vote for you? Let's start off with you, Brother Abdul Rahman.
Good afternoon, Michael. Thank you for having me. I'm running for judge because I think it's time that, and you've been doing defense work for so long, and you've been in front of judges that you sit and look and say, what are you listening to? What are you not understanding about the law? Is it because you're looking at my client and myself and thinking something differently? Are you looking at us and not giving us the time and the effort that you would give my white counterparts? Are you looking at my client and saying, well, I believe you just fit the mold of everyone else, so I can care less? That is why I'm running for judge, because I think it takes time for us, and it is time for us to take the bench and take these different positions, but have people who come from where we come from. Oftentimes, I was told growing up by my grandmother, who's from Shortersville, Alabama, of your colors, not of your kind, son. And I never understood what that meant until I got older. I understand now, of my colors, not of my kind. Well, I'm of your color, Mike, and I'm of your kind because we come from exact same places. It may not have been a Lamford Brown where I grew up at in Richard Island, but I can assure you is the same that you understand that we all have when it comes to coming into that courtroom and having judges and having a court staff and everyone else look at us as if we don't belong. We belong. And because we belong, we need us on the bench so our people can belong. So our people can actually get justice and be treated justly. So that's why I'm running for judge.
Very well said. I want to follow up with that by going to Brother Green in just a few seconds. Let me just come back to you, Brother Abdul Rahman. What is a judge supposed to do? And what I mean by that is, you know American history like I know American history. From 1619 to 1865, there were the so-called slave codes. So should a judge have enforced the slave laws because the law said that? We know what happened to our Jewish brothers and sisters in Germany. And at the time, that whole notion of what the Nazis were doing, the Holocaust, was legal in Germany. So what's your view on the law versus justice?
Well, what we have is we understand that you implement the law, but we also know that what happened with the O.J. Simpson trial, you had something called jury nullification. So we understand that there are ways that when they wanted to, and I say wanted to, allow us to buy property, to vote, and do different things that was adversary to what the law may have said, the letter of the law. So remember, we're talking about the letter of the law.
Yes.
Oftentimes, we don't know how to use the letter of the law in a manner that helps us. Just yesterday, we talked about a case, you and myself, Michael, in reference to whether or not a ownership is required for carjacking. But we understand that the law says if you take someone's car, that's carjacking. But the law does also say that you have to have an ownership right in that vehicle in order to have a carjacking. So we understand when we had the slave codes, you had men on the bench who did not look at us as human beings. The Constitution still calls us 3/5 of a human being.
Ooh.
So we're still not considered a whole person when we're dealing with the judicial system. So when they say, well, we need to do judicial reform, this is one of the things we're talking about, actually making people whole citizens, treating people as if they are human beings. So the law can say a lot of things. We know we have sodomy laws. Well, the sodomy laws will prevent same-sex marriages. How do we deal with that, Michael? We allow for certain things, don't we?
I love the way you think, and that shows why you become a great judge. I'm going to come back to you, Brother Abdul Rahman, to talk about what different judges do: municipal court, common pleas court, commonwealth, superior and supreme court. Let's go to Brother Green. Brother Green, how are you doing today?
All right. How are you, Brother Michael?
I'm doing very well, and it's a pleasure and honor to have you on. I talked about your professional credentials, but you have some pretty impressive academic credentials. What did you do after college, graduating from Cheney? Then we'll get into your legal profession.
Okay. After I graduated from Cheney, let me say first, Michael, thank you for having me on. After I graduated from Cheney, I came back home to the city and county of Philadelphia, and I began working in the field of social work and education. I worked for several places like the Devereaux Foundation, Northeast Treatment Center, and in Carson Valley. I also did some educational work at a place called Village Prep, I believe around 13th and Allegheny. So that's what I did when I came home, working with kids that were at risk. And when I was working with those children, I saw the differences in between the court system and also the social service system, and going to court oftentimes with these children and not being able to advocate when I was spending the most time with these kids sparked my interest in the law.
Well, I'm so glad you had that experience, because we need people like you. Let's talk about your professional career. I didn't know until maybe a couple years after I met you that you actually spent time working in the Montgomery County DA's office. To be quite honest, I didn't know they hired Black assistant prosecutors in Montgomery County. I was actually shocked. Talk a little bit about your experience there.
Okay, my experience, I was one of two African-American assistant district attorneys in the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office at the time. I was selected upon doing my LLM at Temple University for litigation, and I was noticed there. And Risa Fairman gave me the opportunity to come and work in Montgomery County. The other African American, Ms. Fedden, who actually prosecuted Bill Cosby, she was the other person that was in the DA's office at the time. My experience in Montgomery County was different because of the fact that we were the only two African American assistant district attorneys in the county at that time. We dealt with a high population of individuals who looked like us that were there in the DA's office. But the experience, it was a rewarding experience. I enjoyed my time there. I believe that I served that county very well. I was able to make the judgment calls and the right decisions as related to the law on the people that were being prosecuted. So I enjoyed my time at the Montgomery County DA's office.
Brother Green, let me just ask you a few follow-up questions. You're so modest, you're so humble. If I had an LLM, I'd have it tattooed on my forehead so everybody would see it. You just kind of mentioned it in passing. Because as you know, and certainly Brother Abdul Rahman, most people, most lawyers, we simply go to college, get our degree, go to law school, and that's the end of any academic pursuit. What made you want to pursue something beyond the JD to seek an LLM?
Well, one, ultimately, I was thinking, forward thinking. One, ultimately, I wanted to prepare myself if I wanted to teach law school. So having an LLM allows you to do that. That's one of the things that law schools look at if you have an LLM. But more importantly, I wanted to make sure that I got my litigation skills up to par. And Temple is known for being one of the top trial schools in the nation. And so I went out and I obtained that degree. And I did that degree with honors, may I add.
Whew. I knew you were thorough, Brother Green, but I didn't know you were that thorough. Impressed, certainly impressive. Before we go back to Brother Abdul Rahman, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked him. Why are you running for judge, and what would you do as a judge?
Well, the reason why I'm running for judge is it's time for judges to be on the bench that understands the climate of the city. I like to say, and I say this all the time, that I have my pulse. I have my finger on the pulse of the city. I understand and I readily identifies with those individuals that come before the court. And oftentimes, as Mr. Rahman stated, that we, meaning the court system, doesn't treat individuals fair. One, it may be because of the socioeconomic status. It may be because you're Black or brown. And I think it's time that we have quality judges that understands the climate of the city and ready to treat people fairly, regardless of their wealth, station, or class in life. And that's the reason why I'm running for judge.
And as a judge, what do you see the role of a judge? Is the judge supposed to crack down on criminals? Is a judge supposed to give everybody a break? Is a judge supposed to do anything in particular? What's your view of responsibilities of a judge?
Well, it's all of that. It encompasses all of that, and it's based on the facts and the circumstances, the facts, the circumstances, and the evidence as it comes to the court. Judges are supposed to be fair and impartial. Oftentimes, you bring with you your life experience into the courtroom when you're listening to the facts of any given case. So being a judge encompasses whether or not an individual deserves a break. And that individual, if he deserves a break, why does he deserve a break? Right? So you have to look at the entire individual right? You have to look at his background. You have to look at his family. You have to look at his support system in the community. You have to see what his needs are moving forward. So it encompasses everything that you mentioned.
I should have known that I was throwing a softball question to you, because here you are, worked as a prosecutor, still do, but also worked as a defense attorney. So you know both sides. Let me go to Brother Abdul Rahman. And before I ask a new question, I just want to compliment you on the point you made about the legal system relative to Black folk. You talked about the 3/5 clause. And yes, people don't realize, but anytime there's an amendment to the Constitution, those bad words from the past are not erased from the Constitution. They're still written in there. And there's a line that goes through it. But when we talk about the 3/5 clause, we can literally see that. And one thing I want to add to that before I ask you the follow-up question, Brother Abdul Rahman, is many people think that Black folks have their freedom and that slavery ended with the 13th Amendment. But they haven't read the Constitution, because what the 13th Amendment actually said is slavery and involuntary servitude are hereby abolished, comma, except following conviction of a crime. I'm going to throw that to you now. What does that mean, and what practical application does that language have today?
Well, you heard it from one of our sisters in her book. That talked about the new Jim Crow. That's exactly what it is, Michael. It was a way for them to implement slavery without the term slavery. So when we had brothers, and not so much now, it's just a warehousing now, but it was a time when the criminal justice system and particularly the correctional system was used. They had free labor. So a lot of our highways, a lot of our bridges, a lot of agricultural work, in fact, down south, were done by inmates. We talked about the chain gang. The chain gang was created for that purpose, to work on the roads, to clean up, to remove trees, to do whatever. The work was done, but to do it free. We hear guys talk about, when I work, they don't want to work at McDonald's out here for $9 an hour. And when they go to state prison, they work for 50 cents a day. That's exactly what the 13th Amendment did. It allowed these big companies and corporations, again, to feed off of our backs, to build their coffers, and to continue on to be gaining wealth for their family, for their children, for their grandchildren. That's what the 13th Amendment did. So today, when they talk about looking at the third grade, think about this one, Michael. They look at third grade students and say, well, based off of their academic prowess or lack thereof, determines how many correctional facilities we need to build in the future. A third grader, one who can't even clean themselves properly, wash up properly, brush their teeth properly, but they make a determination on whether or not we need to put them in prison when they turn 18 years old. So this is what the 13th Amendment did, and this is where we are still to this day. The prison pipeline is live and well, and they're trying to bring it back even stronger than before.
You know, people who hear you say that Brother Abdul Rahman is thorough, and I'm going to ask the same question to Brother Joe Green. They said he sounds like a bleeding heart liberal. I heard he is from North Philly. I heard he graduated from Cheney. So does that mean that everybody who comes before him is going to get a free pass and go home, no matter how much raping, robbing, and pillaging they do? Explain to us how you will not give everybody a free pass simply because you're Black and you're cool and you're from North Philly.
Well, one of the things, I have one of my little literature things that says tough but fair. That's for a reason. One of the problems I have with several of these judges is they don't understand when they look at a person who needs to be in the sandbox and who doesn't. The bottom line is, like Mr. Green talked about, there are services that we should have in the criminal justice system that we don't have. There are systems that we have in the criminal justice system they can selectively give to whom they want to have. Well, I believe that it should be given to anyone. I believe that you should have some community programs as well, where you don't even have to, you can divert them from the criminal justice system altogether. But let's be clear. I have family members who are doing life in prison. Family. I have family members who are on death row. Family. I understand that they are in the place where they should be at. So therefore, I have no problem with sending you where you want to go. In the neighborhoods, Michael, we have a saying, look at that person over there throwing rocks in the penitentiary. We know what that means. He can't behave himself and need to go sit down for a little while. So there are things that we learned in growing up in North Philadelphia. You never hear somebody in North Philadelphia say, that we don't need the police. You won't hear them say that we don't need to have people going into the prison system. What we do say is we don't want the police brutality. What we do say is we don't want people over criminalized. That's what we say in our community. And that's what I would do on the bench.
I love that, and I want to follow up with Joe Green in just a second, but I love that phrase where you would send people where they want to go. So if you want to go to prison, you're showing me that by doing what you're doing. I'm going to ask both of you two more questions before we wrap this up. The first will be, what's your understanding of what the various judges do from municipal court, common pleas court, superior, commonwealth, and Supreme Court? So I'm going to ask you both about that. Then I'm going to ask you which of those positions are you running for? Because the average person on the street has no idea what the difference between the Supreme Court and the municipal court. So let me start off with Mr. Bill Green. One, what's the difference or what's the roles of the various judges? And amongst those, municipal court, common pleas, superior, commonwealth, and supreme, which one are you seeking?
Okay, I'm seeking the Court of Common Pleas. And let me start off by explaining the municipal court first, and then I'll go through. The municipal court is the lowest trial court. And when I say the lowest trial court, because they hear misdemeanor bench trials. The municipal court also hears felony preliminary hearings, which bounds your serious felonies over to the Court of Common Pleas for trial. The Court of Common Pleas hears bench, which when I say bench, that means in front of a judge, sitting as the fact finder, but the Court of Common Pleas also hears your jury felony cases, right? Then the Superior Court is over top of the Court of Common Pleas, and that's the appellate court for the trial courts. And then the Supreme Court is pretty much the grandfather of all of the courts on the appellate level.
And let me say this, Joe, you must have taken a page out of the book from Brother Malcolm where he said, make it plain. The way you just broke that down, people have no idea about the different levels, now understand it thanks to you. And let me ask Mr. Abdul Rahman, anything you want to add to what Mr. Green just said?
I don't want to reiterate too many of the things he said, but one of the differences that we have in Philadelphia County alone is we are what's called a city of the first class. So we are the only city in the county of Philadelphia and the state of Pennsylvania that have what we have as municipal courts. When you leave and go into the counties, you have what's called magisterial district court. So the magisterial district courts would be the equivalent of our our municipal court. But unfortunately, most of the magistrate justices aren't attorney. So that's what we have. That is a plus here in Philadelphia County. When you go to municipal court.
I want you to expand upon that point, because, you know, a lot of our brothers just in the hood get caught up in stuff in Delaware County and Montgomery County. And then they go before they used to call them district judges, but they're not judges. Now they call them magisterial district magistrates. But let me ask you, so you just said that these people in the counties are on the same level as the Philadelphia Municipal Court, but they're not lawyers? Explain that.
Is the craziest thing. We actually had a magisterial district judge up in King of Prussia who was a former chief of police. So imagine that. We talked about the slave codes. We talked about what happened after the 13th Amendment was ratified. But how in 2020s we have a judge who will sit, a former chief of police. And I'm not saying he can't be fair, but let's be understanding what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a magisterial district court that's dealing with preliminary hearings out there in the county, in King of Prussia, Montgomery County. And he's worked with a lot of the police officers who are going to come before him. Now, when we go at home and you're dealing with your family, oftentimes we will lean to our family. That's another reason why we need to have men like us on the bench, because of my colors, of my kind. And when I look at my brothers and sisters, whether we're family or not, you look at as family to me. And because of that, I'm going to make sure I give you that nod, because we are family. And that nod doesn't mean, again, that you get to go home, but that nod is one of understanding and one of trying to figure out what is needed for you. I've actually told people that when you deal with some of these sentences, we need to really look at how can we have a benefit. A little while ago, Mike, you asked us about the jail itself, and I'm going to get back to what municipal court and the magistrate court and why they're different. But I had to take this tangent to deal with of my color, because when you have those judges out there who are worked in the unions, and a lot of those police officers also work in the unions, because many of them actually before they became police officers had other jobs. We're here in Philadelphia. Many of the police officers came right out of high school and became police officers and been police officers for 20 years. Well, in the county, you may have some who are volunteer for firefighters, so they work together. And all that means is a lot of these guys are more apt to listen to their brethren than they are to listen to the fact. That's the bottom line. So here in Philadelphia, we have municipal court judges, and the municipal court judges are actually attorneys who also had to practice in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for a certain amount of years before they're able to run and be elected by the citizens of Philadelphia County. That's one of the things I would talk about. We talked about Superior Court as being an appellate court. Well, what my Joe and myself are running for is Common Pleas Court, and we are considered the appellate court for the municipal court, meaning that if you had a DUI or you had a simple assault or a terroristic threat, a misdemeanor case that you did not feel as if the judge or the police treated you fairly, and you wanted to appeal, you wouldn't appeal to a Superior Court right away. You would appeal to myself or Joe Green if we're elected to Common Pleas Court, and we will hear that appeal. And if in fact you went from that level at Common Pleas Court and didn't like the decision, then you would appeal to the Superior Court. So you will have two chances of Superior Court appeals, one starting in the Common Pleas Court and then to the Superior Court itself from municipal court. So that's one of the differences you have from municipal court as well as here in the magistrate district courts out in the county.
Very well said, as I expect. And I love the part about how you said in your role, you could give a nod to people, but you're talking about a nod of justice, a nod of understanding. That's critically important. I don't want you two to respond to this. I'm just going to say it and I'm going to move to something else. I'm really disappointed with the approach of the Democratic Party when it comes to black lawyers trying to get Democratic Party support to become judges. Now, this is me, Michael Cord, the angriest black man in America talking, but I am not while you two are on, but in an upcoming episode of TV Courtroom, as well as on my radio show, as well as in the Philadelphia Tribune, as well as in my column in the Philadelphia Magazine, as well as my column in the Pennsylvania Capital Star. I'm going to expose the frauds in the leadership of the Democratic Party who say one thing publicly, but when qualified black lawyers try to get their support to become judges, it's a whole different thing. Now, again, that's not Joe Green talking. Again, that's not Kwawi Abdul Rahman talking. That is me talking. Having said that, I'm going to let you two talk last. This is the TV courtroom, and as in many courtroom proceedings, certainly in trials, there's an opportunity for a closing argument. I'm going to give you both whatever you need, 2, 3, 4 minutes for a closing argument where you can summarize what you've already talked about, or if there's something I didn't ask you and something you want to talk about, you're welcome to do that. So I'm going to start off with Joe Green, candidate for the Court of Common Pleas here in the city of Philadelphia. As I pointed out, is a former defense attorney, worked in the Montgomery County DA's office, also is working now in the Philadelphia DA's office, is not just a great attorney, but I would argue an academic who holds a master's degree after graduating from law school. In addition, he's from North Philly, and probably more important than anything I said, he's a graduate of historic Chain University. He pledged the wrong fraternity, but that's a whole other thing. We won't even get into that right now. But having said that, the final 2 or 3 minutes for your closing argument, Mr. Joe Green, anything you want to add, repeat, or highlight, the microphone and camera are yours.
All right. Thanks again, Mike. I want to say this. I grew up here in the city and county of Philadelphia, from North Philadelphia. I grew up at 16th and Style Street. Product of the Philadelphia public school system. I graduated from William Penn High School and was fortunate enough to attend Cheney University, as you stated. I also have a master's degree in education. I came home, began work, social worker, working with kids. So I've been connected to this community from the time I was born. I went off to law school in Houston, Texas. came back to Philadelphia because I ultimately love this city. Right now, I'm raising 3 beautiful children in the city and county of Philadelphia. My wife is here with me, and I understand the climate of this city. I've been fortunate enough to be a defense attorney and a prosecutor in this city. I understand the individuals that come before the court. I understand the victims in this city. In 2007, I had 2 family members that were murdered on my grandmother's doorstep at 6 in Oxford with one of their childhood friends. So I have also experienced being a victim of crime in this city. I have prosecuted crime in this city, and I understand what this city needs as it relates to the criminal justice system. In addition to that, there are without violating any rules of saying what a judge would be like. As Mr. Rahman stated, we know the ones in this city that need to be parked, meaning who need to be incarcerated. The word is accountability. It has to be accountability in this city for the individuals that commit crimes. There also has to be accountability for those deserving individuals that deserve second chances. And I have been on both sides of that as both a defense attorney and a prosecutor in the city. I'm more than capable of doing this job as a judge. More importantly, being respectful and having civility to those individuals that come into the courthouse. And oftentimes, we know as lawyers, we call it rogue fever. Being a judge has a lot of power. And sometimes your character can take you places that you can't necessarily sustain because you're not humble enough. And I'm not that individual. So with that said, I'm asking for everyone's vote on March 16th or May 16th. And I'm ready to begin this work.
You know, I said I was going to give you 2 or 3 minutes, and you are perfect because you got in just under 2 minutes and 51 seconds. Well done. Before we finish with you, Mr. Green, give a shout out to your friend. What are you a member of?
I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi at the Bloody Beta Gamma chapter at Cheney University.
Well said. And finally, before we finish with you, Mr. Green, if folks want more information about you, is there an email address, is there a phone number, is there a website? How can folks get more information?
Yeah, you can check out my website at Joe Green. That's the color green, GREEN for judge.com. And there you will see my bio. You can also donate to my campaign as well.
Mr. Green, thank you very much, not only for the great work you've done for the community, not just the Philadelphia community, but the Montgomery County community, and just being a product of North Philly, showing people what can come out of North Philly. Having said that, we're going to give our 2 to 3 minute closing argument to Mr. Kwame Abdul Rahman. The clock starts now.
Thank you again, Michael, and thank you, your listening audience, for being here. I'm sure you've educated your audience prior to myself and Mr. Green coming, so I know there are voters who understand what needs to be done. The more important thing is, I thank you for allowing us the opportunity so people understand the importance of judges. When you talked about it, I listened to the radio Courtroom on URD and how you start off, and we talk about what type of law that you're going to talk about on the radio show with your show. And one of the few things that we often hear is people are concerned about the mayor race. They're concerned about the governor race, but they're most important about the president race. One thing about WURD, which I'm glad you're on, you're able to bring some life to that radio station. Election starts locally, and politics are local. But more importantly, the judges are the most local and most important. because like you started off when you introduced this is, a judge is the one who can make a determination of taking you away from your family, taking your freedom away. A judge is the one who can say, brother, I know that you want to be with your child, but I'm not going to allow you to. A judge is the one who say, I know you're trying everything you can. You've been laid off and it's financially hard for you right now, but you have to evacuate that property. A judge has that power to do all of those things that mostly impact our lives, directly impact our lives. Now, of course, the government can come in with eminent domain and take your property, but that takes time and that takes court. But the judge can come in one moment and say, that is it. This is what's going to happen. And that's horrible. And it's horrible that we in our community don't understand the importance of that. It's horrible that our school system, and it has to go back to not being taught these things. We haven't been taught the proper social studies when it comes to, I'm just a bill, I'm only a bill, I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. You remember that back in the day, Michael, on Saturday mornings you had Schoolhouse Rock. But we lost a lot of these things, so a lot of people don't understand what's really going on. As being a product of Philadelphia schools, I went to Saul High School for agricultural sciences. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I saw a man be beat to death during the Rizzo time by the City of Philadelphia Police Department. My voice was silent. My grandmother's voice was silent, who also watched it because she was deaf. She was born in South Carolina in a time when they didn't have Helen Keller School for women who were deaf. So she was a domestic. She didn't know sign language. She didn't know how to sign her name. She learned how to do those things when we were kids. Her grandkids taught her how to sign her name. So when we talk about the things that we need to have in our community, we need people who understand, but more importantly, who are there and come from where we're from. I went to law school in 1994. In 1995, I started coaching Little League football. I started coaching Little League football in 1995 because I saw the children talk about all the things that didn't make sense to me. I grew up having mentors and men around me. Whether they were there just for me, they were there. I saw men who stood up and wrote letters for me later when I tried to join that same fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, with my line brother, Joseph Green, Deacon Peterkin, Reverend Arthur Lee Johnson. They were both men of Omega, but their characters stood not the fraternity colors. Nowadays, most of our brothers who are in our fraternities, they have license plates and they have the sweatshirts and they have this. But when it comes to the real work, they're not there. When it comes to being a real just judge, we don't have them. When we have judges now who just wanted the power to put the black robe on, I've been a lawyer for a very long time, but I stay in the community helping our children. You can find me anytime during this football season on a football field with these children, not hiding, not taking trips to the Caribbean, but being right there with our children, knowing that we need to be there for our community. That's what I do best. And that is why I think I can have an opportunity to be a temperamental judge that will say, hey, listen, we're not here for that today. We're not here for that today because I know what you need. I understand mom sitting in the back that may be crying, but let me tell you what I'm going to do for your son. I'm going to send your son somewhere we can actually learn a trade. That when he comes home, and although he has that red badge of courage, that felony conviction, he can open up his own business. He can be an entrepreneur. Why? Because he may be able to become a master plumber. He may be able to become a carpenter. He may be able to become an electrician. So we're not just looking at sending him to prison. We're looking to see how can we rehabilitate him, how we can bring him back into the community, make him a productive member of society. That's another job that a judge does. I wear thobe to court, not because I think that I'm more religious than someone else. I wear thobe to court because we have a high Muslim population in the city. And it bothers me to know that in the city that has a high population of Muslims, there are no Muslim judges. I would be the first. It's 2023. How then am I the first Muslim judge? How is it that when the children walk into that courtroom, they don't believe, in fact, that Muslims can be on the bench? They don't believe that a person who preaches and learns the religion like them can actually be in that position. When I walk by in the courtroom, and you say it, Mike, we walk in the courtroom, and a lot of times, especially in the county, they look at how can we help you? I don't know how you can help me, but I know I can help everybody else that's in here. I can go in here and be an advocate for my client. That's how I can help them. So I don't know how you can help me, because they look at us as if we don't belong. We shouldn't have in 2023 the first of anything anymore. We've had the first openly gay. We've had the first Catholic president. We've had the first everything when it deals with religion and everything else. But why is it that we don't have our first Muslim judge in the city and county of Philadelphia? I'm asking you to help me change that May 16th of this year and put me on the bench. And I'm asking you to put me on the bench because we've talked a lot about having a person on the bench who looks like us, who thinks like us, and come from where we come from. But let's not be fooled, ladies and gentlemen, in our community. We also have a problem with prejudice against ourselves. How people will look at me and say, well, he's a Muslim, so I don't want to put him on the bench. I know that he's black. I know that he understands. I know that he'll be fair, but I can't get over the fact that he's Muslim. But yet we will put a person on the bench who don't look like us and will harm our community every day and twice on Sunday. We have to do better, ladies and gentlemen. And I believe that putting myself and Mr. Green on the bench, it will be a start for that better.
Very, very well said. Now, final 10 seconds, Mr. Abdul Rahman. If folks want more information, is there a phone number, website, email? How can they follow up?
Yes, my website is Rahman for Judge, the number 4, judge.com. And my email address is Qawi Abdul Rahman, the number 4, judge@gmail.com.
To both of you, Mr. Joe Green, to Mr. Qawi Abdul Rahman, it's my pleasure, and as I said, my honor to have you both on. I'm hoping that people remember your names when they go to the ballot box in order to do the right thing. As we pointed out, it's important in the May primary to vote for the right candidate for mayor, for city council, for city controller, for city commissioner, for sheriff, for register of wills. But it's even more important to vote for the right persons for Supreme Court, for Superior Court, for Commonwealth Court, and believe it or not, maybe even more important for Common Pleas Court and Municipal Court, because most stuff can't get as far as Commonwealth Court or Superior Court or Supreme Court. We talk about the front line of justice, it's Municipal Court and certainly Common Pleas Court. That's why I'm voting for Mr. Qawi Abdul Rahman. That's why I'm voting for Mr. Joe Green. I want to thank you both for being guests today. I want to thank the folks who tuned in, and I'm going to end today's show in the next 30 seconds by reminding people about the upcoming May primary. That's May 16, and then the general election, November 7th. People say, well, what's the difference? What's the big deal? Because Democratic voters outnumber Republican voters 8-1 in Philadelphia. Whoever wins the primary is pretty much a shoo-in for the general. That's why it's so important on Tuesday, May 16th, or before if you're doing it by mail, to remember Common Pleas Court Judicial candidate Qawi Abdul Rahman, Common Pleas Court Judicial candidate Joe Green, and do the right thing. They're not going to do any favors for anybody. They're going to do justice for everybody. Let me end today's show, as I always end the shows. Think Black. I'm out.